One of the things that I've noticed from working for such a long period of time with Springfield City Group and in the Springfield region is when I compare that to my other work around the country, where I'm working in other growth areas like the Northwest Corridor of Perth, in Joondalup and Alkimos, or in places like the Hume Corridor in Melbourne, or the Greater Dandenong region, or even the corridor from Parramatta to Penrith in Western Sydney. When you're looking at these areas, one of the things that dawns on me and really strikes me about Springfield is the diversity of drivers of growth in the Springfield region. There's a lot of growth happening in a lot of places around the country, and one of the things that when you look at and start digging deeper into the drivers of growth of other areas is often they're one-trick ponies. It's all about population growth, or there's one economic asset upon which all the economic activity is based. And that's great when that's the thing that is hot. But when it's not, it all falls over. Diversity of growth and diversity of drivers of growth is really, really important to sustaining long-term economic prosperity. The population projections that have been produced by the state government in the region for Springfield have been consistently under what the actual growth has been. And of course, that makes sense. Like as a public servant who's a demographer who's projecting things, this story, if it hadn't have already happened, is ridiculous. You would never project 7% year-on-year growth for a population centre. You just wouldn't do it. You'd be laughed at if you presented that to your colleagues and peers. But the reality is that that's what's happened already. I can't underestimate and I can't overstate, how important it is to know that this has been by design and by intention, not by accident. And that is a competitive advantage that other regions around the state and other regions around the country cannot replicate. Because it was decisions made 30 years ago, not decisions made now, that have resulted in this growth profile and these drivers, these diverse drivers being in place right now. You're looking at an additional 230,000 people within the corridor as a whole, as really the primary catchment of the principal activity centre of Springfield by 2041. The scale of the growth means that the region, Springfield specifically, and the wider region will continue to be a destination of choice and a preferential destination for new people who call Queensland home. These are new migrants from interstate. These are new migrants from overseas. These are people from other parts of southeast Queensland who are looking to travel to somewhere with schools, hospitals, universities, public open space, regionally significant retail, business opportunities, job opportunities, sport and recreation facilities. There's not many places you can point to in southeast Queensland as other preferential locations that you can point to and say, yes, that place has all of those things. You want population growth, but it's the quality of the population growth, not just the quantum of it. Because you want a young and engaged population that's wanting to be economically and socially integrated into the community and be participating into the community, because that builds a level of vibrancy and dynamism that is really, really important to pushing prosperity and growth into the future. You want them engaged in the economy, high levels of employment, high levels of business creation, and you want a skills profile in that population to make you attractive to inward investment and new business growth. And that's a really important distinction, because when you look at other places around the country where there has been rapid population growth, often it's a homogenous population from a labour force pool. It doesn't offer the diversity of skills, and it often doesn't offer the capacity within that economy or that location to build more skills. The unemployment rate within Springfield got above 5%. I say that scarily because I work in a lot of places where it hit 20%. So what that shows is a level of economic, social, and environmental resilience in your labour market. And that's really important. If you're looking to grow a business and you're looking to plan for your business going forward into the future, and you're looking for things like skilled workers, succession planning, these types of issues, what that points to is a labour force that is resilient, a labour force that is skilled because they're less likely to be impacted by external shocks, and a labour force that is economically engaged. They're looking to work. And that's a really, really important driver and attribute of the region going forward. Because of the economic activity here, the population is expected to remain relatively robust and young going forward into the future. And that's the university has a huge role to play in that, because it's the attraction and the retention of students who act as your local domestic production of young workers and new workers for this environment and for the business environment going forward into the future. That doesn't mean that the size of the population who is older and age 65 plus isn't going to increase. It's going to increase by a lot. It has to, because the population is increasing by a lot in the region. What it does mean, however, is that unlike a lot of other locations where the size of the aging burden is going to get so great it crowds out all other activity, that is not expected to take place here in Springfield. Springfield is expected to continue to have economic activity above and beyond that which is required to support an increasing older population. And there are very few locations in Southeast Queensland, let alone Australia, that can point to that. There are a lot of businesses in a lot of different industries here in Springfield. There's no one of them has just a ginormous chunk that counts for 40–50%. There's lots of different industries, which means there are lots of opportunities and there's a diversity in the business community. So if an external shock happens, i.e. the pandemic, it's less likely to impact a large share of your labour force, of your business community, of your economic activity. You want that diversity because that diversity gives you resilience and security going forward. So when we drill down then into some clusters of economic activity and economic and business environment, we can see that there is a significant health cluster that is emerging within the area, and that's increasingly being driven not just by population here, but population in the surrounding area. The retail and entertainment space continues to build in sophistication, and the offering is moving away from a solely sort of supermarket-based population servicing into a lot more of the cafe, restaurant, tavern, a hotel type of offerings as it becomes more sophisticated. The money that's associated with that sector goes just from a residential to a residential and a commercial driver. The school and education space, I don't think we can understate how unique it is for a region or a location to have a major university's presence as early as it did in Springfield. We're seeing the lessons that have been learnt from Springfield being replicated in places like Petrie and North Lakes with the Mills site, or in places like in the southern areas of the Gold Coast, where the population growth outpaced the attraction of these tertiary educations. And it's a really hard behaviour to unwind. If people are used to leaving your location to go somewhere else for jobs, retail, work, whatever it might be, even when you put that thing in place and you improve the transport infrastructure, it takes generations to unwind the behaviours that you've already embedded. So we can't overstate how important that university and education sector is. I mentioned before the defence exposure, which hasn't really even realised yet in terms of, not just in terms of direct defence personnel, but also those supply chains in the contractor space. The professional services technology sector, which has been one of the biggest drivers of both employment growth and business growth over the last few years, as people who previously were hopping in a car or hopping on the train and going into inner Brisbane went through the pandemic and went, hey, I can do that here from home. I can set up my business locally. I know a few of them. I'm one of them. And so that has changed the nature of the business community in the location in such a short period of time. And then sport and recreation. A few years ago when I did this presentation, I'd be talking about the regionally significant sporting facilities of the area and what that means in terms of events and carnivals and people coming from outside of the region. Now we add the AFL to that, and the stadium, and the forecast when it comes to the Olympics as well. And those opportunities have suddenly gone from being regionally significant to nationally and globally significant as well. So again, if you're a business, if you're an investor and you're looking to go somewhere, why are you going to go to somewhere where you're immediately entering a location where you have an older population burden on your economy, on your community, on your facilities and services? Or are you going to pick a location where you can have a much more dynamic business, employment and investment environment that's generating wealth to help maintain an older population as they exit the workforce? You're going to pick the latter.